UFC on ESPN 5 on Saturday, early in the day, 3 p.m. where I'm at, where it's usually a 10 p.m. card. The card, not too great. The main event is amazing. The co-main event is, I guess, a blast from the past, but does really nothing for the division. And Miller and Guida are pretty much at the later ends of their career, but you do have a great fight in Joaquim Silva versus Nasrat Haqparast. Hope I pronounced their names right. So we're going to go through those three fights. Silva versus Haqparast. Two great prospects, two exciting prospects with great striking. Haqparast is more of a wrestler. He's a little bit more well-rounded than Silva is. But Silva has the power advantage and the willingness to exchange at any given moment. And if it comes to trading blows, Silva is going to win. He's very reckless, very ruthless, and because of that, he can knock out opponents with any punch he throws. I mean, committing 100% to every single punch, it makes his offense a lot better than his defense because any punch he throws, he leaves himself vulnerable. It's crazy. Even jabs, when he's not trying to do anything crazy, he still leaves himself so vulnerable. He drops his hands, lifts his chin sometimes, and his reflexes, his head movement is a little bit off timing. When he tries to move his head, he gets hit first and then his head moves after. You know, the timing of his head movement is not there yet, and that's going to be extremely dangerous when he fights Haqparast, who is physically, he looks and he fights just like Kelvin Gastelum. Looks like Gastelum's younger brother, but they're on other sides of the world. Haqparast, southpaw fighter, great left hand, great 1-2. That left hand of his is just dynamite. I mean, he could throw a right hook, which is pretty nice, some kicks too, and mixes up with takedowns if he has to go that route. And Silva has shown to have a discrepancy in takedown defense in his last fight against Jared Gordon, and Haqparast is going to have the speed advantage and the precision. The fact that Silva got tagged so many times from Jared Gordon is a bit alarming, man. So I expect Haqparast to be a chin checker in this fight and put on a bit of a performance to show that he actually belongs maybe into the top 15. He's only 23 years old and he has made leaps of progression in this game already. But I think he's going to win by a decision. I think he might win by a 30-26 scorecard. If he trades though, if he gets into an exchange, he could lose that. But I think his craftiness should prevail in this kind of contest. And then we go to the co-main event, blast from the past, Jim Miller versus Clay Guida, each having over 40 fights, over 80 fights in this contest alone. They have never fought each other, and they've both been in the UFC for over 10 years. That's a bit shocking, huh? But this fight should be pretty competitive. I think, both being at the end of their careers. I don't see a super exciting fight. Both are great grapplers, decent strikers. Clay Guida strikes a lot more than Jim Miller does these days. I would say Miller has a better jiu-jitsu game, but Clay Guida can dictate if the fight goes to the ground or not. He has great takedown defense, and the movement could probably give Jim Miller a bunch of problems. And the fact that Clay Guida has 9 submission losses out of his 18 losses in his career, that's a bit alarming. Because Jim Miller has 16 submission wins, which is, I believe, top 5 in UFC history. But the only problem is how he's going to get it there. If you look at the guys he's actually submitted, like Jason Gonzalez in his last fight, which is actually pretty impressive, but Gonzalez is not a good wrestler at all. Alex White, not a great wrestler, even those two guys are huge compared to Miller. Miller should be a featherweight, if anything. He has submitted Yancy Medeiros, again, not a good wrestler. Melvin Gallard, a lot of strikers or a lot of submission artists he has submitted before. Not a real wrestler like Clay Guida, who dictates where the fight goes. And that's where I see a major problem for Jim Miller. To be honest, I can see this fight going either way. I could see a very competitive, maybe split decision win. And I think it's going to come down to who has the better striking that night. I would say Clay Guida has shown better striking, TKOing Joe Lozon, beating up BJ Penn on the feet, which is not saying too much these days, but he has done that. He beat Eric Koch as well. My prediction for the fight, I'm going to go with Clay Guida because he is an underdog, and I think it should be a pick'em fight. To be honest, I can see this going either way. It's a super competitive fight. But I'm going to go with Clay Guida. I'm going to go by a split decision. And then we go to the main event. The best fight on the entire weekend, in my opinion, even though I know one championship is going to go on Friday. Colby Covington versus Robbie Lawler. With title aspirations written all over this, especially if Colby wins, who Dana White even said if that happens, Colby's going to get the next title shot 100%. Now, Colby brings a high-pressure, high-pace fight, really strong wrestling, constant output with his hands, feet, flying knees, all sort of stuff to close the distance and push the opponent backwards. Robbie Lawler has shown to get backed up a bit. Ben Askren backed him up just by walking at him, no threat on the feet, and RDA did the same thing. Tyron Woodley actually did the same thing as well. I don't know what's going on with Lawler's approach. He's usually a more aggressive fighter. He has to be aggressive in this one. Trying to counter Colby Covington with all the chaos that he brings is going to be pretty hard, especially when those takedowns are going to come out of nowhere. He's very fast to switch. He can change the levels in a blink of an eye. So if Lawler's trying to measure, punches are getting thrown at him, he's trying to cover up and look for that big left counter shot or big check right hook that he knocks out a lot of opponents with. He might not even see Colby in eyesight. Colby goes right under for the double leg, takes it to the cage, tries to take Lawler to the ground, even though Lawler is amazing takedown defense. Colby is going to constantly work. It's not going to be the first takedown that's going to be the problem. It's going to be the next 5. The chain wrestling of Colby can potentially get to Lawler eventually. Even RDA was able to get Lawler to the ground. I understand Lawler was injured in that fight, but if Lawler is able to push the pace a little bit, stay in neutral ground at least, where neither are being backed up, constantly throwing jabs and keeping the output high to compete with Colby so he's not forced to move backwards, that's where I see Robbie Lawler having an advantage. His striking is eons ahead of Colby's. In terms of power, in terms of precision, in terms of form, his left straight is super precise. Like he constantly landed on Rory McDonald, eventually finished it because of that straight left hand. His jab is really quick to get in. His stutter steps in that Rory McDonald fight was excellent, and I would love to see a little bit more of that. I have a feeling he might be a little bit too tentative. Maybe just watching Colby and not throwing anything crazy like he did at Ben Askren. Against Askren, he really let Askren dictate the pace of the fight and walk him down because of that wrestling threat. I don't know if he's going to do the same thing to Colby Covington. It's hard to really tell what he's going to do. He said he's going to go forward. It'll definitely be better for his case. The first round, I see Colby trying to get Robbie to back up, but as soon as Robbie starts throwing punches with Colby, I see Colby constantly and almost antsy, like trying to get those takedowns, like desperately, man. And I see a lot of them failing in the center of the cage. I think Colby needs the cage to really get Lawler to the ground. So that goes to my prediction for this fight. Man, this is hard to call. It all depends on what Robbie Lawler does. Colby's going to fight the way he always does. It's very effective against almost everybody in the division. It's the best way he can fight because he doesn't have the knockout power and he doesn't have the lone striking efficiency to really change it up on the feet. He needs to get it to the ground, and against the cage with pressure is the best way for him to do it for his style. My prediction for the fight, I'm going to go with Robbie Lawler, and I know I might regret it. I have a feeling Colby might win this fight because I have a feeling Robbie's not going to go out with the right kind of game plan. He might initially do so, but I have a feeling that he's just going to get away from his game plan and allow Colby to back him up. But it's a 5-round fight. Colby is extremely wild with the striking, and Robbie is extremely precise and powerful. 5 rounds for Robbie to connect that one big shot and put down Colby with great takedown defense, and there is a chance he's going to go out and pressure Colby Covington. I'm going to go with Robbie Lawler, and I actually think Robbie is the best underdog in the entire card, or at least one of them. They have him as a 2-1 underdog. Colby's an over 2-1 favorite. That's insane. That is ridiculous. That's unacceptable. I believe this should probably be somewhere to a pick'em fight. Colby may be a slight favorite because he was an interim champion, I guess. But stylistically, this fight is extremely close. It comes down to game planning. It comes down to positioning. Comes down to who does what. So I'm going to go with Robbie Lawler. I'm going to go by a 4th round TKO. I actually think he's going to be losing the fight up until he catches Colby Covington. Maybe he wins the first round, but then I have a feeling he's going to start backing up and eventually find that opening on the vulnerable Colby as he constantly attacks. Some of it's going to fail early on, but I think eventually that shot's going to land. And then let's look at the betting odds here. So Claudio Silva is almost a 5-1 favorite over Cole Williams. I actually do not know who these guys are. But like I always say, man, when new fighters, one of them is that much of a favorite over another new fighter, it usually spells bad for those odds, Probably not crazy to put something on Cole Williams. I'm actually surprised they put Antonina Shevchenko as that slight of a favorite. They were really high on her when she fought Roxanne Modafferi. I agree with that. Shevchenko should be a slight favorite in that fight. There's a lot of slight favorites. Dong Hyun Ma is a big underdog against Scott Holtzman. I do not agree with that wide of a gap there. I would say Scott Holtzman should win, but it's definitely not a 4.5-1 favorite. Holtzman's coming off a loss to Nick Lentz. Before that, he had 3 wins in a row, 1 knockout win against Ellen Patrick, who doesn't have the greatest chin. And before that, he lost to Josh Emmett, which is understandable. He won against Cody Pfister, and before that, he lost to Drew Dober. Dong Hyun Ma is a very similar record in his recent career. He lost his last fight to Devontae Smith, which is no slouch at all. Devontae Smith, I believe, is going to be a top-ranked fighter eventually. Before that, he beat Damian Brown, he TKO'd Takanori Gomi, and he beat Brandon O'Reilly. Before that, he got knocked out twice, so that's a bit alarming. Like I said, I think Scott Holtzman is going to win, but Dong Hyun Ma definitely has somewhat of a chance. So I think Lawler is the best dog of the entire card. A 2-1 underdog, that's crazy, man. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe. My next video is going to be a breakdown of one of the fights this weekend, so be looking out for that. There might be a results and reaction video if the card is really good. Usually cards like this do perform pretty well, so definitely tuning in. But yeah, we'll see about the reaction. And I know One Championship is also coming up this Friday, and I might make a breakdown on Demetrius Johnson's fight or Eddie Alvarez's fight or some fight that really sticks out, And be looking for all those. And again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.